The Elisarian cruiser shimmered like liquid starlight, descending through Earth's atmosphere with elegant precision. Every journalist, scientist, and diplomat on the observation deck craned their necks to glimpse the arrival of the delegation from Elisar, a civilization millennia ahead of humanity in technology and culture. Standing at the forefront of the group was Princess Valeria. Her towering figure, wrapped in iridescent fabrics that seemed to breathe with her movements, exuded an otherworldly grace. Her alabaster skin glowed faintly, and her crystalline eyes held an amused detachment, as though she were already bored with what Earth had to offer. The murmurs of awe from the crowd only seemed to deepen the smirk on her lips. Valeria leaned toward her chief advisor, speaking in Elisarian tones that sounded like wind chimes caught in a storm. "So fragile," she said, glancing at the humans. "How have they survived their own evolutionary chaos?" Her gaze fell upon me, Dr. Merrick Solis, one of the lead xenobiologists assigned to her. Unlike the rest of the crowd, I had no time for awe or intimidation. After months of preparing for this exchange, I was too preoccupied with ensuring everything ran smoothly. "Princess Valeria," I greeted, offering a hand in the human custom of handshakes. Her eyes flicked to my palm as if it were a curious insect. "This is your greeting ritual?" she asked, her voice a blend of mockery and genuine curiosity. Instead of taking my hand, she raised hers in a gesture that looked like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. A faint hum resonated in the air between us, a subtle display of Elisarian telekinetic communication. "Close enough," I replied dryly, withdrawing my hand. "Welcome to Earth." Her laugh was musical, though unmistakably condescending. "It will be amusing to study your kind up close," she said. "Your physiology is so quaint." Over the next few days, Valeria's disdain for humanity became the stuff of legend among the research team. She'd scoff at our inability to regenerate limbs or endure extreme temperatures. Her comparisons to Elisarian advancements, such as bioengineered reproduction that required no physical intimacy, were endless. Despite her arrogance, Valeria was undeniably brilliant. Her insights into genetics, neurology, and even human psychology often left me speechless. Yet her superiority complex made every conversation a battle of wits. One evening, as we walked through a botanical garden set up for cultural exchange, I decided to challenge her perspective. "You keep dismissing humanity as inefficient," I said, gesturing to a vibrant display of flowers. "But isn't diversity a strength? Our imperfections drive innovation, art, even love. Can Elisarians say the same?" Valeria paused, her expression unreadable. "Love," she repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. "A biochemical response to ensure procreation, nothing more." I smirked. "Says the species that engineered itself out of needing love. Maybe you're just jealous." For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the hum of insects. Then, to my surprise, she laughed. Not the mocking laugh I'd come to expect, but something lighter, almost genuine. "Perhaps," she said, her crystalline eyes glinting. "But I doubt your so-called love could stand up to Elisarian scrutiny." The conversation stayed with me, lingering like the scent of the garden blooms. I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath her aloof demeanor, Valeria was curious. The rest of the evening played out in a dance of culture and curiosity. Valeria observed the botanical garden as if cataloging a primitive artifact. She reached out, brushing her slender fingers against the petals of a rose. To my astonishment, the flower changed colors under her touch, shifting from deep crimson to a shimmering silver. "Our biochemistry interacts with simpler organisms," she explained, noticing my wide-eyed stare. "The plant responds instinctively to my energy signature. Your flora is crude but malleable." I watched as she moved gracefully among the displays, her fascination thinly veiled beneath her cool exterior. Yet, for all her superior airs, there was a softness in her movements, a subtle reverence for the beauty of life on Earth. It was the first moment I wondered if there was more to her than the arrogance she wore like armor. As the night deepened, the research team and Elisarian delegation gathered for a formal dinner. The event, intended to foster goodwill, instead became an arena for Valeria's sharp tongue. "Your species relies on physical proximity to reproduce," she announced, twirling a translucent fork in her hand. "How inefficient! On Elisar, reproduction is a matter of choice, conducted in specialized biolaboratories. No mess, no emotion, no Connection, I interjected, earning a raised eyebrow from the princess. Precisely, she said, unbothered by the challenge. We evolved beyond the need for such primitive ties. Our bonds are intellectual, not chemical. That sounds lonely, I said bluntly, ignoring the startled looks from my colleagues. Valeria's gaze locked onto mine, sharp as a blade. Lonely, she repeated, as though the concept were foreign. Yes, I said. You might think love and connection are inefficient, but they're what drive us. They give our lives meaning. The table fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. For a moment, Valeria seemed taken aback, her crystalline eyes narrowing as if she were re-evaluating me. Then, with a faint smirk, she said, "A romantic notion. But hardly practical." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I could feel Valeria's gaze on me throughout the meal. It wasn't the condescending glance of before, it was something different. Something thoughtful. Over the following days, my role as her assigned liaison brought us into close proximity. We toured research labs, cultural landmarks, and natural wonders. Valeria absorbed every detail with a mix of fascination and bemusement, often questioning the logic behind human traditions and systems. One afternoon, we visited a wildlife reserve. The Elisarian princess had shown little interest in Earth's fauna until she encountered a family of elephants. The sight of the matriarch shielding her calf from the sun, their trunks intertwined in what appeared to be affection, caught her attention. "They protect their young?" Valeria asked, her tone unusually soft. "Of course," I replied. "Family bonds are crucial for survival. Isn't it the same on Elisar?" "Our offspring are raised collectively," she said. "Individual attachments are discouraged. Such bonds lead to inefficiency." I watched her as she observed the elephants, her expression distant. For the first time, I detected a hint of vulnerability in her. "You don't believe that, do you?" I asked, unable to keep the question to myself. Valeria's head turned sharply toward me, her crystalline eyes narrowing. "Do not presume to understand me, human." Her words were sharp, but there was no real bite to them. If anything, they sounded defensive. That night, while reviewing the day's data in the observation deck, Valeria appeared unannounced. She wore a simpler version of her usual attire, the luminous fabric dimmed to match the soft lighting of the room. "I've been studying your species' reproductive systems," she said without preamble, taking a seat across from me. I choked on my drink. "That's specific." She ignored my reaction. "Your process is inefficient, yet the emotional connection it fosters seems to be a defining trait. Fascinating, but still primitive." I set my tablet down, meeting her gaze. Primitive doesn't mean worthless. It's part of what makes us human. Her crystalline eyes studied me intently, as though trying to decipher a code. "You speak of this connection with such conviction. Have you experienced it yourself?" The question caught me off guard. "That's personal." "On Elisar, there is no concept of personal," she said. "We share knowledge freely." "Answer the question." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Yes, I've experienced it. It's not always easy, and it's not always rational, but it's powerful. It makes us stronger." Valeria's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps there is something to learn from your inefficiencies, after all." Her admission surprised me. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of genuine curiosity in her, not just about humanity, but about the connection she had so often dismissed. As the stars glittered outside the observation deck, I couldn't help but wonder where this unorthodox partnership would lead. The days following Valeria's subtle shift in attitude were nothing short of surreal. Her earlier arrogance remained, but there were cracks in her aloof facade, moments where curiosity overpowered disdain. She began asking questions about human life that went beyond biological mechanics or evolutionary inefficiencies. "Why do you celebrate anniversaries?" she asked one morning as we walked through the bustling streets of a human city, part of her cultural immersion program. "Because they mark important milestones," I explained. "They remind us of the things we've overcome and the bonds we've forged. It's a way of saying, I'm glad we're still here together." Valeria tilted her head, her crystalline eyes flickering with thought. "On Elisar, time is measured in cycles, but we do not commemorate such trivialities. Every cycle is the same as the last. Efficiency demands consistency. Doesn't that get Boring? I asked. She gave a small laugh, one that carried less mockery than before. Perhaps. But Elisarians do not have the luxury of boredom. Her immersion in human culture was a study in contradictions. One day, she marveled at a street artist painting a mural of Earth's diverse landscapes, her expression uncharacteristically soft as she traced the vibrant colors with her gaze. The next, she dismissed human cuisine as nutritionally imbalanced after trying pizza for the first time. "You truly consume this?" she asked, holding up a slice as if it were a hazardous material. "It's a global favorite," I said, biting into my own slice. "There's more to food than just nutrients. It's about taste, comfort, and shared experiences." She narrowed her eyes at the slice in her hand before taking a cautious bite. Her expression remained neutral for a moment, then shifted to mild surprise. "It is tolerable," she admitted, which, coming from her, was practically a rave review. One evening, as we reviewed her findings on human physiology, Valeria made an unexpected comment. "You are unlike the others," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I glanced up from my notes. "How so?" "You challenge me," she said, her crystalline eyes locking onto mine. "Most humans either fear me or seek to impress me. You do neither." I shrugged. "I don't see the point in pretending. You're here to learn about us, not to be worshipped." Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "It's refreshing." The tension between us was palpable, though neither of us acknowledged it. For all her talk of Elisarian superiority, there was something undeniably human in the way she looked at me in that moment. Curiosity, perhaps even admiration. The turning point came during a visit to a refugee camp. It was not part of the official itinerary, but I had convinced Valeria to see a side of humanity she hadn't yet encountered. The camp was a chaotic tapestry of resilience and despair. Children played with makeshift toys while adults bartered for supplies. Despite their circumstances, there was a palpable sense of community. Valeria observed in silence, her usual air of detachment replaced by something I couldn't quite place. "Why do they not leave?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "They can't," I said. "War, poverty, politics, it's not always easy to start over. But they endure because they have each other." As we walked through the camp, a small girl approached us, holding out a crude drawing of a starship. Valeria knelt, her towering figure seeming almost gentle as she accepted the drawing. "Is this your creation?" she asked the child. The girl nodded shyly. "It's you. And your ship." For a moment, Valeria seemed at a loss for words. Then she smiled, a warm, unguarded smile that transformed her entire demeanor. "Thank you," she said, her tone free of condescension. That night, as we returned to the research facility, Valeria was unusually quiet. I finally broke the silence. "Seeing them like that, it's different than reading a report, isn't it?" She nodded, her crystalline eyes reflecting the city lights. "Your species is resilient. Even in the face of adversity, you create. You endure. It is admirable." Her admission took me by surprise, but before I could respond, she added, "Perhaps there is more to your inefficiencies than I first believed." It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. For the first time, I felt like we were truly bridging the divide between our worlds. Valeria's fascination with human resilience and connection grew more pronounced in the days that followed. While she still viewed humanity's reproductive processes as inefficient, her curiosity began to take a more personal turn. Her questions about human intimacy became bolder, her inquiries less clinical. One afternoon, as we worked in the lab analyzing comparative genetic data, Valeria set aside her hollow interface and turned to me with an uncharacteristic seriousness. "Dr. Solis," she began, using my formal title for the first time in days, "I wish to propose an experiment." I raised an eyebrow, already suspicious of the gleam in her crystalline eyes. "What kind of experiment?" "Your species claims that emotional and physical connection enhances reproduction. If this is true, I wish to experience it firsthand. With you." The statement hung in the air, absurd in its directness. I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. "You're joking, right?" "Elisarians do not joke," she replied, her tone deadly serious. "I have studied human reproductive biology extensively, but observation is not the same as experience. If I am to understand your species fully, this is a necessary step. My brain scrambled to process her words. Valeria, this isn't just some clinical procedure. You're talking about intimacy. It's not something you can just analyze in a lab. Her crystalline eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her presence magnetic. Are you suggesting humans lack the discipline to separate emotion from science? No, I said quickly, then hesitated. Well, maybe. But that's the point. It's not just about biology. It's about trust, vulnerability, connection, things that can't be quantified. Then this will be a test of those claims, she said, her voice softening. You have spent weeks challenging my perceptions. Allow me to challenge yours. The conversation lingered in my mind long after we parted ways that evening. Her proposal was as audacious as it was unsettling. I couldn't deny the scientific merit. It would be a groundbreaking experiment in interspecies understanding, but the personal implications were enormous. That night, I found myself staring at the stars from the observation deck, wrestling with a decision. Valeria joined me, her presence as silent as the cosmos. You are hesitant, she observed, standing beside me. I sighed. This isn't just a scientific choice, Valeria. It's complicated. Her crystalline eyes searched mine, their usual sharpness softened by something I couldn't quite place. On LSR, complexity is avoided. Yet here, I find myself drawn to it. Perhaps it is your inefficiencies, as you call them, that make you compelling. Her admission startled me. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in her, a willingness to step into the unknown. If we do this, I said carefully, it can't just be about science. It has to mean something. Valeria tilted her head, considering my words. Then let it mean understanding, she said. For both of us. The next day, we began preparations for the experiment. Consent protocols, physiological baselines, and cultural considerations were meticulously documented. Despite the clinical nature of the preparations, the tension between us was palpable. Are you nervous? I asked as we calibrated the monitoring equipment. Elisarians do not experience nervousness, she said, though the faint flicker of her luminous skin betrayed her. Sure you don't, I teased, earning a rare smirk. When the moment came, it was nothing like I expected. The lab's sterile environment faded into insignificance as we crossed the threshold from colleagues to something far more intimate. Valeria's touch was tentative at first, her movements both calculated and curious. Yet, as we explored the uncharted territory between us, her usual precision gave way to something raw and unfiltered. For the first time, I saw Valeria not as a superior being from a distant world, but as someone vulnerable, searching, and profoundly alive. The aftermath was equally transformative. Valeria sat beside me, her luminous skin dimmed, her crystalline eyes reflecting an emotion I couldn't name. It was unlike anything I have ever experienced, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my own thoughts a chaotic swirl. Yeah, it's a lot to take in. She turned to me, her gaze uncharacteristically soft. You were right. Connection cannot be quantified. But it can be felt. Her words struck a chord deep within me. For all her initial arrogance, Valeria had opened herself to something entirely foreign, risking not only her pride but her very understanding of existence. In that moment, the divide between our species seemed smaller than ever before. The days following the experiment were marked by a shift neither of us could ignore. Valeria's demeanor, once rigid and analytical, softened in ways I had not thought possible. It wasn't that she abandoned her superiority complex entirely. She still found flaws in humanity's systems, habits, and even its architecture, but her criticisms were tempered with a new understanding. You humans build monuments to impermanence, she said as we toured an ancient cathedral. Yet there is beauty in their flaws. Her admission took me by surprise. Coming from you, that almost sounds like a compliment. Do not get accustomed to them, she replied with a faint smirk. Our connection did not go unnoticed. The research team, as well as the Elisarian delegation, began to sense the change between us. While most were too polite, or too intimidated, to comment, a few whispers circulated through the facility. One evening, my colleague Dr. Karen pulled me aside. "What's going on with you and the princess?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and concern. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "She's gaining a better understanding of humanity. Karen raised an eyebrow. That's one way to put it. Just be careful. The Elisarians aren't exactly known for their leniency when it comes to breaches of protocol. The warning lingered in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to regret what had happened. Valeria wasn't just a diplomat or a subject of study anymore. She was someone who had challenged and reshaped my understanding of the universe, and myself. Valeria, too, seemed to grapple with the implications of our connection. One evening, as we worked late in the lab, she set down her hollow interface and fixed me with a piercing gaze. Your species' capacity for emotional entanglement is overwhelming, she admitted. That's part of being human, I said. We feel deeply. It's messy, but it's also what drives us to create, to care, to keep going even when things seem impossible. She nodded slowly. On Elisar, such feelings are considered distractions. Yet, here, I find them intriguing. Even, she hesitated, as though the next word was foreign to her, enriching. Her vulnerability in that moment was striking. For all her intelligence and superiority, Valeria was experiencing something entirely new, and it was reshaping her just as much as it was me. The tension between our species, however, loomed like a storm cloud. The Elisarian High Council began to question the prolonged nature of Valeria's mission. Rumors of dissent among the Council reached Earth, and whispers of potential recall orders began to circulate. They fear what they do not understand, Valeria said one evening as we reviewed a report from the Council. They fear change, I corrected. And you're changing, Valeria. Whether they like it or not. She looked at me, her crystalline eyes reflecting a mixture of determination and uncertainty. If they recall me, I will not comply. The declaration was as bold as it was dangerous. Elisarians were bound by strict adherence to their collective's will, and defying the Council was unheard of. You'd risk that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, I see beyond the rigidity of my people, she said. And I cannot unsee it. To return now would be to undo everything I have learned. Her resolve was unwavering, but I could see the weight of her decision bearing down on her. The tipping point came during a joint cultural exchange event. Representatives from both species gathered to showcase their achievements and discuss potential collaborations. While the event was meant to foster unity, the underlying tensions were palpable. As Valeria and I presented our findings on interspecies understanding, a member of the Elisarian delegation interrupted. This experiment was unauthorized, the delegate said, his voice cold and accusatory. Princess Valeria, you have overstepped the bounds of your mission. Valeria's crystalline eyes hardened, but she remained composed. I have fulfilled my mission's purpose, to understand humanity. Your fear of unconventional methods blinds you to the truth. The delegate's expression darkened. You have compromised your integrity and jeopardized our relationship with this species. Before I could respond, Valeria stepped forward, her luminous presence commanding the room. If understanding is a compromise, then I welcome it. Humanity's inefficiencies are their strength, and we have much to learn from them. Her words sent ripples through the assembly, eliciting a mix of shock and admiration. For the first time, I saw the Elisarian princess not as an aloof diplomat, but as a bridge between two worlds. Later that night, as we stood under the stars, Valeria turned to me, her expression unreadable. They will try to recall me, she said. Perhaps even punish me. But I will not abandon what I have discovered here. You don't have to face this alone, I said. Her crystalline eyes softened, and for the first time, she reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. Perhaps connection is not as inefficient as I once thought. The days following the cultural exchange event were a whirlwind of tension. The Elisarian High Council's displeasure with Valeria's defiance was clear. Communications from Elisar were terse and demanding, each message insisting she return immediately for reassessment of priorities. Valeria ignored them. We cannot allow their fear to dictate the course of progress, she said one evening as we walked through the research facility's arboretum. They cling to their ideals as if they are unshakable truths, but I have seen what lies beyond them. Her words carried a determination that both inspired and worried me. The Elisarians were not known for leniency, and her rebellion could have severe consequences. What if they force you to go back? I asked. She stopped walking and turned to me, her crystalline eyes luminous in the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants. Then I will stand my ground. For the first time, I feel as though I am truly alive. I will not return to a life devoid of meaning. Meanwhile, the experiment's results had sparked a firestorm of interest among both humans and Elisarians. Reports and analyses were scrutinized, debated, and, in some cases, outright dismissed. For every human scientist who saw the value in the data, there was an Elisarian delegate who deemed it irrelevant or dangerous. They fear what the experiment represents, Valeria explained as we reviewed the latest critiques. If humanity's approach to connection proves valid, it challenges the very foundation of Elisarian philosophy. Sounds like they're scared of change, I said. Change is a threat to those who believe they have already achieved perfection, she replied, her tone laced with both frustration and resolve. Despite the pushback, the results were undeniable. The experiment had revealed not only biological compatibility but also the profound impact of emotional and physical connection on the participants. It was a testament to the strength found in vulnerability, a concept that Elisarians had long dismissed. As tensions between the two species escalated, Valeria and I became the focal point of the debate. Some saw us as pioneers, while others viewed us as a dangerous anomaly. The pressure was immense, but through it all, Valeria remained steadfast. One evening, as we reviewed the latest developments in our quarters, she turned to me with a rare moment of vulnerability. "Do you regret what we've done?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her, surprised by the question. "Not for a second." "Do you?" She shook her head, a faint smile gracing her lips. "No. But I fear what may come of it." "We'll face it together," I said, reaching out to take her hand. Her fingers intertwined with mine, her touch both delicate and resolute. "Together," she echoed. The inevitable confrontation came sooner than expected. The High Council dispatched an emissary to Earth, a stern-faced Elisarian named Quarren, whose presence was as imposing as his reputation. Quarren wasted no time in asserting his authority. "Princess Valeria, you have overstepped the bounds of your mission. Your actions have jeopardized our relationship with humanity and undermined the Council's directives. You are to return to Elisar immediately." Valeria stood her ground, her crystalline eyes blazing with defiance. "I have done what was necessary to fulfill the mission's true purpose, understanding. If the Council cannot see the value in that, then they are blind to the future." Quarren's expression darkened. "Your defiance is unacceptable. You risk not only your position but the stability of our people." "And what of the stability of our understanding?" she countered. "Do you not see that humanity offers us something we lack? Their inefficiencies are a strength, a testament to resilience and connection." The confrontation escalated, drawing the attention of both humans and Elisarians in the facility. As tensions reached a boiling point, I stepped forward. "Valeria's work here has bridged a gap that neither of our species could have crossed alone," I said, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "If you recall her now, you undo everything we've achieved together." Quarren regarded me with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "And who are you to speak of what Elisar needs?" "I'm the one who stood beside her when no one else would," I said firmly. "And I'll keep standing by her, no matter what." The standoff ended with an ultimatum. The Council demanded Valeria's immediate return, but she refused to comply. The situation was unprecedented, leaving both sides scrambling to determine the next course of action. In the aftermath, Valeria and I retreated to the observation deck, where the stars stretched endlessly before us. "They will not relent," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of her defiance. "Neither will we," I replied. She turned to me, her crystalline eyes shimmering with determination. "Then we must forge a new path. One that belongs to neither Elisar nor Earth, but to us." The words hung in the air, a promise and a challenge. Together, we stood on the precipice of an uncertain future, bound by a connection that defied logic and expectation. The days after Valeria's refusal to return to Elisar were marked by uncertainty. With the High Council's orders hanging over her, the fragile peace between our species teetered on the brink. Yet, in the midst of chaos, a quiet resolve had taken root between us. We weren't just participants in an experiment anymore. We had become a symbol of defiance, of possibility, of what could be achieved when two entirely different worlds dared to reach for understanding. The turning point came when the Elisarian delegation, led by Quarren, announced a final meeting to determine Valeria's fate. The decision would not only impact her, but also the future of human-Elisarian relations. The hall was packed with representatives from both species. The tension was palpable as Quarren took the stage, his gaze sweeping over the assembly before settling on Valeria. "Princess Valeria," he began, his voice resonating with authority, "your actions have placed us in an unprecedented position. The Council demands your immediate return to Elisar. Failure to comply will result in exile, a fate no Elisarian has faced in millennia." Gasps rippled through the room, but Valeria remained composed. She stepped forward, her presence commanding, and addressed the assembly. "If exile is the cost of progress, then so be it," she declared. "I have seen the potential of humanity, their resilience, their capacity for connection, and I will not deny what I have learned. To return to Elisar now would be to abandon not only this mission but the truth." Her words hung in the air, a challenge to tradition and fear. To everyone's surprise, Quarren did not immediately retaliate. Instead, he turned his gaze to the human representatives. "And what of you?" he asked. "Do you believe this experiment justifies the risk it poses to both our species?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "It's not just an experiment anymore. What we've done here proves that understanding is possible, not just through observation, but through connection. Valeria has shown us that even the most advanced civilizations have something to learn, and humanity has much to gain in return. This is not a risk, it's an opportunity." The room fell silent as Quarren considered my words. Finally, he spoke, his tone measured. "The Council may not see the value in what you've achieved, but I cannot deny that it has changed things. Perhaps it is time for both our species to reconsider what we believe to be absolute." In the days that followed, a compromise was reached. Valeria would not be forced to return to Elisar, but neither would she remain under the Council's authority. She was officially declared an independent envoy, free to continue her work with humanity. The decision was historic, marking the first time an Elisarian had broken from their collective and been allowed to forge their own path. For Valeria, it was a bittersweet victory. Though she had gained her freedom, she had also relinquished her place among her people. Yet, as we stood together on the observation deck, gazing at the stars, I saw no trace of regret in her crystalline eyes. "I have lost much," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But I have gained something far greater." I reached for her hand, our fingers intertwining. "You've shown both our worlds what's possible. That's more than anyone could have hoped for." She turned to me, her luminous skin shimmering in the starlight. "And what of us? What do we make of this connection?" I smiled, feeling the weight of her question and the infinite possibilities it held. "We make it ours. Whatever that looks like, wherever it takes us." In the years that followed, Valeria and I became pioneers in a new era of interspecies collaboration. Our work bridged the divide between humanity and Elisar, inspiring others to challenge their assumptions and embrace the unknown. Together, we proved that connection, no matter how improbable or imperfect, could transcend the barriers of biology, culture, and fear. And as we continued to explore the uncharted territory between our worlds, one thing became clear: the stars had never seemed closer. The end.